today's top boxing news.
Ow! Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of this weekend's big mega match over there across the pond in the United Kingdom, the Boxer Show.
The co-main event to the main event.
What seems like a main event unto itself. The Super Featherweight Showdown unification match between the homegrown champions from right here in the US of A, Mikaela Mayer and Alicia Baumgardner. I happened to catch the Trash Talk featurette featuring Alicia and Mikaela, Andre Ward, Timothy Bradley.
Mikaela Mayer's kept a cool head throughout all of this.
She's not as fiery, not as passionate as Alicia Baumgardner, who at times seemed to fumble her words or almost be at a loss for words.
The different people that have different temperaments.
Mikaela Mayer is as calm as a cucumber, confident
and relaxed because she feels she belongs here and she wanted this.
The same can be said for Alicia Baumgardner. I mean, we wouldn't have gotten this far. We wouldn't be here now if both fighters didn't want this. So that goes without saying, but both fighters, they are very different people. They both have different temperaments, where Mikaela Mayer,
she's seemed better with her words.
A bit, yeah.
Keeping a steely reserve, she has seemed calm, cool, composed, and better with her words.
Quiet kind of confidence, where Alicia is more fiery, more passionate. It almost feels like she's done talking and there's nothing else left to say.
At times it felt like she was struggling to get the right words out, but with Mikaela Mayer standing right in front of her, being so close to her.
And so much having already been said between the fighters in the past leading up to this point, it's almost like Alicia's done talking, and now that her and Mikaela are sharing the same space, she's ready to go, and she's ready to go now. But she will have to wait until Saturday.
They're both likable fighters in their own way.
Although there does seem to be a growing number of people that feel Mikaela's got the mental edge, at least ahead of the fight, based on what they've seen in the Trash Talk featurette on ESPN, what they saw on Sky Sports more recently when both fighters were right in front of each other. They feel that Mikaela's got a mental edge. She seems sharper, better with her words, and she's more relaxed. Myself, I wouldn't get too hung up on anything you see or anything that gets said ahead of the fight, because Amir Khan seemed to have had a mental edge over Kell Brock in the build-up of their fight.
It was pretty fucking funny, right?
He was better with his words than Kell, seemed sharper, wittier.
He did seem to go into that fight with a mental edge, but once the opening bell sounded, you know what you saw.
You know how it played out. You know what happened. It's for this reason I'm not too stuck on the fighter's behavior ahead of the fight. The fact that Alicia seems a little bit more emotional, more fiery, more passionate, whereas Mikaela is more calm, cool, and reserved. That's just them being different people with very different...
They've got different temperaments and their inner workings. What is most visceral is very different between them.
When you're talking about two fighters, two competitors, as capable and nuanced as Alicia and Mikaela, it really is hard to get a fix on what you're going to see the night of the fight. How's it going to play out? How's it all going to look? How will Mikaela Mayer approach this fight with Alicia, and how will Alicia respond? Can she respond? There's an overwhelming amount of people out there that seem to think that Mikaela Mayer has Alicia's number. That's probably because they've seen a lot more of Mikaela over the years than Alicia. Mikaela Mayer's been with Top Rank for something like 4 years now.
They've likely come across her fights more times than they have Alicia's, because Alicia only recently stepped into the spotlight.
Through no fault of their own, their opinions on the fighters and their opinions on Alicia might be less informed because they've seen less of her. They don't really know what she can do and everything she is capable of. That might be why.
Might be why it seems like a lot of people are going with Mikaela. They know more about Mikaela than they do about Alicia.
They've seen more of her, sporting a professional record of 17 wins, no losses, and no draws.
5 knockouts.
To Alicia Baumgardner's 12 wins with 1 loss and no draws, 7 knockouts. That one defeat, that lone defeat, came at the hands of the very capable and dangerous Christina Lenardatu. There's no shame in that.
Alicia's a little shorter than Mikaela Mayer, a little younger.
About 4 years, having 3 or 4 less fights than Mikaela does as a professional.
They're both orthodox fighters.
Both fundamentally sound, though there are noticeable differences. Mikaela Mayer's base style is more textbook,
more conventional, whereas Alicia's base style is more nuanced, more stylized.
A lot of movement, moving those feet, moving that torso, moving that head, angling that upper body away from punches to counter in kind.
Volume has to go to Mikaela Mayer.
Speed and power would have to go to Alicia. Which one of the two is more durable? Well,
you don't go 10 rounds with Maiva Hamadouche of all people if you're not durable, especially if you spend most of the fight with her in the pocket, in her sweet spot.
within the line of fire, so you kinda have to give durability to Michaela Mayer on the premise that you've actually seen her in there with a dangerous puncher.
We haven't seen Alicia Baumgardner in there with a puncher like that. Not yet.
For those of you out there that aren't actually familiar with both fighters, you will know that there is a credible argument on either side of the aisle for either woman to win the fight. For those of you that are well informed. For those of you that aren't, most of you will end up leaning towards Michaela because you've seen more of her. And that's understandable.
I get it.
But even having seen every single one of Michaela Mayer's fights, and having seen everything that's out there, everything that's available in reference to Alicia, how she fights, it's still hard to imagine how the fight is going to look because they're so versatile. They do so many things well.
They both do. Not gonna lie to you, I'm looking forward to this weekend's fight, but I don't presume to know everything.
Even if you are familiar with both of these fighters, it's a bit of a wild card because they both do so many things well. In men's heavyweight news, on the heels of his big win over Luis Ortiz, Andy Ruiz said, "Main advantage was weight I put on. Ortiz wasn't able to drop me."
You know, that's what I said ahead of the fight.
It's literally what I said. Andy Ruiz not trying to come down in weight and be a more small, streamlined version of himself. It would be an advantage. He's actually better when he's heavier. He was quoted as saying, "The main advantage was the weight I put on. He wasn't able to drop me," Ruiz told BoxingScene.com and other reporters after the win. "I felt if I was 250 something, it would have been a fight of him dropping me and me dropping him."
That fat neck Andy's got, you know what that is? That's a shock absorber.
That's what that is. In the nuts and bolts sense of the word, the brain jostling inside of the skull when the head is jostled, that's what causes the knockout. But a good shock absorber can minimize how much jostling is going on.
Andy Ruiz not trimming the fat, going in there heavier and having a fatter neck.
Believe it or not, that could service as a shock absorber that results in more durability and better punch resistance. Andy said, "I felt strong. I felt explosive. I was a bit too cautious. He hits hard, so I had to be smart."
Andy Ruiz hadn't fought in over a year's time ahead of this Luis Ortiz fight. It's not even his own fault.
He tried to get a fight with kickboxer turned boxer Tyrone Spong earlier this year, and the people at the PBC pulled him out of that. And on the schedule he's been on, he would have had time to knock out Tyrone Spong and go right into that Luis Ortiz fight, but they pulled him out of that Spong fight.
And I guess it's because they didn't want to risk it. If Andy loses to Spong, what's the sense in doing a Luis Ortiz fight?
But whether it was Tyrone Spong or somebody else, Andy Ruiz needed those rounds. He needed those rounds in the bank ahead of a Luis Ortiz fight.
Because if he doesn't get those rounds in the bank, he's going to be shaking off ring rust and cobwebs in the fight with Ortiz, and you don't want that.
Not when Luis Ortiz has actually fought in the last 12 months, and you haven't. There are a lot of people, they're very critical of Andy's performance. They not only feel he was too cautious and careful, they actually think he looked bad. I don't think they're being as level-headed and understanding as I am of the situation, that you are talking about a fighter that hadn't fought in over a year, so
he's not going to be as sharp as he would be if he were more active. That's the way these things work.
That's how it is. You're not going to be as explosive. Your reflexes aren't going to be as sharp. Your timing will be just a little bit off.
Blame the PBC for keeping this guy on the shelf for so long, because he tried to get himself a fight and they pulled him out of it.
Though the fact that Ortiz was unable to drop Ruiz shouldn't dismiss the power that the 43-year-old heavyweight still boasts. They both hit hard, Ruiz noted, of both Joshua and Ortiz when asked to compare their punching power. Anthony Joshua hit me with a shot I didn't see coming, and it put me down. With Luis Ortiz, I was more cautious. He threw a left hand that I saw coming. It hit me, and I was like, damn.
Luis Ortiz landed several straight left hands down the pipe, Luis Ortiz being a southpaw, leading with his right hand
in order to set up his left, his power hand. He had a bit of height on Andy Ruiz, bit of reach. He was the more mobile fighter of the two, even though he's speculated to be around 50 years old. Better still, mobility, movement, length, all of those were advantages for Luis Ortiz in this fight.
He landed several straight left hands early that got Andy Ruiz's respect once Andy felt the power.
That's how he knew he had to be careful. But Andy still landed, what was it, 2 or 3 knockdowns in this thing? Off a year of inactivity, over a year, having not fought, he was still able to drop this guy. 3 times. So what that tells me is if he would have been just a little bit more active ahead of this Ortiz fight, he would have been able to close the show. He would have been able to finish him.
Because he would have been faster, he would have been sharper and more explosive. He wouldn't be shaking off ring rust in the middle of the goddamn fight.
I went with Andy Ruiz to win this thing by way of knockout or technical knockout. He ended up winning a decision instead, scoring 3 knockdowns along the way. And I was right to assume that the added weight would be an advantage for Andy.
Because he won't be as durable if you thin him out.
His punching power won't be as dangerous if there's not as much weight behind the punch.
Andy's always had fast hands, and his hand speed is mid-range to inside what it is. He's got speed there.
But even with that hand speed, if you thin him out, there won't be as much weight behind the punch, and it won't do the same damage.
Strange as that might sound, he's actually more dangerous as a portly, rotund fellow than the other way around.
The idea of a more streamlined, athletic Andy Ruiz, well, how much weight, how much exactly would he have to shed before he becomes this light-on-his-feet fighter?
He's never going to go in there and be Mike Tyson. He's never going to go in there and be Kid Dynamite.
So if what they were thinking initially is they're going to get this guy to shed the pounds so that he can be lighter on his feet, well, how many pounds would he have had to shed before that happened, and how?
You saw how that affected him in the Areola fight. It hurt his punch resistance. He got dropped in that fight.
He leaves Eddie Reynoso, gets a new trainer, packs on the pounds, goes in there with Luis Ortiz. Luis can't score a knockdown. He can land several straight left hands, hard ones, but he can't put the guy on his back pocket.
It was never a good idea to try to make Andy a thinner fighter.
And they had the right idea ahead of this fight. A heavier Andy Ruiz is a deadlier Andy Ruiz.
Is he deadly enough to knock out Deontay Wilder?
That depends on whether or not he can get inside. There is a trade-off to all of this. A heavier Andy Ruiz is a less mobile Andy Ruiz. Andy has never had fast feet.
Attention now turns to the winner of Wilder versus Helenius, and most people are expecting the winner to be Wilder.
I'm expecting the winner to be Wilder. The height differential between the fighters, the wingspan, their sweet spots. Wilder's sweet spot is mid-range to outside when he can get full extension on that arm, whereas Andy Ruiz's sweet spot is mid-range to inside, in the pocket, deep in the pocket. He's lethal there, but he has to get there. I've said that before.
If you're eating straight left hands from a southpaw, you could just as easily eat straight right hands from an orthodox fighter.
Straight right hand of Deontay Wilder is his money punch after all. It's the one punch he spends the entire round trying to land. And Andy Ruiz not having the fastest feet or the best head movement.
Better fix that shit.
Figure it out.
Because Wilder's next.
And finally, just in keeping with the theme of heavyweight news, Frank Warren's bold prediction for a potential Joshua versus Fury fight and what it might do domestically at the box office, he anticipates it could sell 2 million pay-per-view buys, breaking the previous record.
Could it really sell that much? The UK really ain't all that big.
I tend to take whatever Frank Warren says with a grain of salt, just a pinch. But I don't think he's off base here. I don't think he's off the mark. If you actually could do this fight before this year is out, I think it could very well do that well at the box office. 2 million pay-per-view buys. And when you have 2 separate promotional outfits involved and 2 competing platforms, that's the kind of pot you need to warrant a joint pay-per-view. The pot's gotta be big enough that both platforms can share it, that both platforms can make money individually. If the people at BT Sport put a fight together that brought in 1 million pay-per-view buys, well, depending on what the operational costs are, that would be very big for them. And the same is true when it comes to DAZN. If DAZN were able to put a fight together and it sold 1 million pay-per-view buys, that would be very big for them, depending on what the operational costs are.
You can only really do joint pay-per-views for big fights, really big fights, like Maypac.
Was Oscar De La Hoya earlier this year proposed they do a joint pay-per-view for Munguia versus Churlo. That fight ain't got the size, scale, or profile to where you need 2 platforms to be involved. When you're talking about a fight that size, one of you guys has simply got to cross the goddamn street in order to do it, because it's not big enough for 2 platforms to be involved. But a fight like this, Joshua versus Fury, it is big enough commercially
that everybody can make money.
DAZN being a global streaming platform, the fight could be available by way of DAZN in foreign markets where they could turn over a profit from it. Domestically,
when you have a streaming platform that's available in over 190 countries, a lot of things are possible. This is one of them.
When it comes to the UK rights, it becomes a little bit more tricky because both platforms and both promotional outfits would be expecting to make a good sum of the money from those Brits. from that UK market.
It gets tricky when it comes to the US rights for the fight as well.
Top Rank would presumably want to be involved because they promote Tyson Fury in this part of the world, in this country, but he can't enter into this country, you understand. And you are talking about a fight that would be happening in the United Kingdom, across the pond. It's not happening in Vegas. So Top Rank doesn't even necessarily need to be involved.
Emphasis on need. There's no need for them to be involved because it's not happening in America. They're not promoting the fight.
It certainly would declutter the situation if Top Rank weren't involved, because then those U.S. rights would go to DAZN, who actually is involved.
At least more involved than Top Rank.
That doesn't mean that Top Rank wouldn't want to be involved, obviously. They'd want the U.S. broadcast rights for the fight, and that's not saying that they wouldn't get them either. They might, if they actually do this fight, though. Are they going to do this fight?
The basic idea here is, the less fingers you've got in that pie, the better.
To declutter the situation, because it really would be more of a Matchroom and Queensberry affair, and Top Rank,
yeah, they definitely want to be involved, though it's not necessary.
Not necessarily. If, in order to reach a deal, the people at DAZN concede to letting Queensberry distribute the fight in the United Kingdom,
they might at least want the rights to the fight in the United States, though whether or not they'd get them, that's another question.
And whether or not this fight is even going to happen is yet another question, because this could all end up being much ado about nothing.
You already see there's trouble in paradise. Tyson Fury saying he wants the fight at the end of November or the beginning of December.
Whereas Anthony wants it on the 17th, closer towards the end of the match. All things considered, if Tyson Fury wants to get paid, I think it's a concession he should make.
It's not immediately obvious on the surface yet to most people, but Tyson Fury doesn't have a lot of options for a box office fight.
You already fought Deontay in America 3 times. You already fought Dillian White in the UK.
Alexander Usyk's out for the rest of the year.
If you bungle up this situation, assuming you really even want it, and this isn't all just a bluff, if you bungle this up
without AJ to help sell it, who are you gonna fight?